All right, Amanda, good morning. Well, it's even earlier where you are, right? Well, you're an hour behind me in Michigan
No,
or
we're on
two.
Eastern time zone. So
Oh,
it's
you are
10
Eastern
o'clock.
time zone. Okay. Yeah, you're right. My son's in Indiana and I remember we were driving through past Purdue and then the time changed by an hour. So yeah, so you guys are Eastern. Okay, good. So it's 10 o'clock there too, because you're not in San Francisco. You are in Michigan today, right?
Yes,
Yes.
for a few months to enjoy the good summer weather of the Midwest.
Good. All right, good. And your headset's working good. We're going to talk about some cool stuff today. So was it your publicist or something connected us?
Mhm.
Something like that, right?
Yeah, I work with a group called the Expert Bookers, and they're the ones who introduced the two of us to get me on the podcast.
Very good. Okay, so I think what I'd like you to do for the growing listenership, hopefully, is talk about your background, like where you're from, because I know you said you're from Michigan, what your background training is. I have it in your bio, but nobody has that. And then we can get into what Arch Collective is and its unique model, because I think for startups, founders, entrepreneurs, it's a very unique model that you've put together. A lot of people in the marketing world are not doing so. But once you take it away, let's go back to the log cabin you grew up in.
Sounds perfect. Well, here in Michigan, I did grow up in a family of entrepreneurs. So starting something new and working with entrepreneurs is in my DNA, as one would say. However, my career journey also started somewhat entrepreneurially, as my first job was working at a startup company. I worked for an orthodontic startup in
Oh,
Texas. Uh,
like a
Orometric.
device company?
Well, they offered a solution called SureSmile, which shortens the time you wear braces.
Okay.
And in fact, they were acquired a couple years ago by Dentsply, so I got to experience my first exit as well.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a
And
good thing to
so
experience early, I think, in your career, right?
it is. And the other thing that working for a startup, got me used to was being extremely flexible and nimble and wearing lots of hats. And I never had the luxury of working for a big brand that everyone knew. I started off in sales. And so when I walked in the door, I had to get them to understand the problem and get them to understand why our technology was something even worth looking, not with the benefit of people knowing the brand. And I always joke that for most of my career, my family had no idea where I was working or what I was doing because they weren't household names. But I liked it, and it was the start of me even beginning my career and beginning Arch Collective, where I work exclusively with startup companies.
Yeah, you kind of got bit by the bug early.
I
Yeah,
did.
definitely. Well, I think
So
I think the
yeah.
startup world is kind of mysterious to a lot of people. They think of it as this like, tech startup exit for billions of dollars type of thing. And I think getting into that world early probably helped you with understanding it and being comfortable with it and working with these people, right?
That's so true. And there's their own language within the world of startups. And
Right.
I think
Right.
a lot of times what people see are the sexy sides of the story, or even the
Yeah.
like dramatic fall downs like a WeWork or something,
Right.
or you hear of an Uber, or all of these dramatic stories. But really with startups, there's thousands of startup companies that are invested in every year, and only
Right.
a very small fraction of them get to that kind of level. Certainly a small fraction that becomes a unicorn, as they say,
Right.
but even smaller that becomes acquired or makes it in the market and continues to get funding or goes
Right.
public.
And that doesn't mean there aren't successful startups, but it just, you don't exit for Google money. You don't sell YouTube to Google for $17 billion or whatever they sold it
Right.
for,
Or
but
like
that doesn't mean you
Instagram
don't
to
do well
Facebook.
and then
Yeah.
maybe go on to another venture, right? I mean, it's a big industry.
Yeah, and I specifically focus on B2B companies, which are even more hidden in the background in
Right.
the
Because
world
you
of
don't, as the
startups.
average consumer, even hear about
Exactly.
them. Right. Yeah.
Right. So, and to your point, there are massive acquisitions and a ton of deals that take place on the B2B side that never really hits the average consumer's
Right. It hits the
radar.
trades and stuff, not outside of the business world. Maybe
Exactly.
not even outside of the industry in which they're merging. So if it's what's the phone company? I'm with T-Mobile. If T-Mobile merges with Sprint, obviously everybody's going to know it, right? Because they deal with consumers. They also deal B2B, but if they're unknown in that industry or they're a business that supports some other consumer organization, you never hear about it. Yeah,
Exactly. You
right.
you nailed it.
Yeah. So I was looking at your bio. So you've spent a lot of time in corporate. I mean, you've worked for a lot of companies, right? Getting a lot of experience on the street.
Yeah, I started small and worked my way to bigger and bigger companies, and which isn't typically how it goes. And it was my last role at a large publicly traded company. I think at this point they're valued at around $7 billion. So it was a big company, and I just it wasn't resonating with my DNA and that entrepreneurial spirit. Things move a lot slower. You have a very niche role in those types of organizations, and I worked with
Right.
great people and learned a ton, but it
Right. But your
wasn't for me.
impact is like, incremental. It's not being, yeah, I understand. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes. And so, being the person that I am, I'm like, I'm gonna go back to my roots, and I'm in the, Silicon Valley area. I live in San Francisco most of the time.
Right.
And so I started interviewing for CMO roles at B2B tech startup companies,
Like
mostly
smaller
in.
companies.
Yeah, usually at that point they have, call it $1 to $3 million in revenue. They have a handful of clients, which in
They're
the
funded. They've been like maybe through one round or
yeah, so Series A funding is usually your first big round of funding,
right.
and
Yeah.
it's
Past
a
friends and family and stuff like that. Maybe an
exactly.
angel in between, right?
hmm
Okay.
And the fact that you have revenue is a demonstration of product market fit, meaning like, hey, you're offering something and people actually want to pay for it and consistently pay for it.
Right.
And so while I was interviewing with four different companies at one time. I was like, they all seem to have the same problem, and they all want to pay me about the same amount, which would have been a pay cut. And so I started doing a bit more research, and I'm like, this is something that's quite prolific in this space. And I kind of joked to my spouse. I said to him, I'm like, why don't I just work for all four of them? I'm like, if I did that, I could so efficiently solve their problems,
Yeah.
and
You'd
that would
probably
be
make more money. It'd be less expensive
right.
for each of them.
Exactly. But
Right. And
that's
getting better
exactly what I
expertise.
set out to do, and that's what
Yeah.
I've done with Arch Collective,
So this
where
was what year? This was a couple of years back.
2019.
Oh,
So a
perfect
couple.
timing. So you go to your husband, you're like, I'm quitting my job. We got two kids. Did you have two kids at that point?
Yeah, my youngest was about six, not even 6 months
Oh,
old.
perfect. I remember those days. That's a great time to like start your own business. I mean, why? You're not
Right.
sleeping anyway. You might as well, right? Just
Right.
start your
Just
own
throw
business.
another log on the fire,
Exactly.
as they say.
Right. Exactly. Not knowing that 6 months later or whatever it was, I don't know what point of 2019, you would be in the middle of a pandemic. You
Right,
didn't
right.
even know that
Two
was
young
coming
kids, a mortgage in San
in
Francisco,
San
and then a pending
Francisco.
pandemic coming,
Right.
or, let's do it. This
Right.
is the
Which you and I
perfect
were
time.
talking off the mic is one of the top two or three most expensive places to live in the country.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes. And
sure.
well,
That all
and
makes sense to me.
and I think it's something that I feel really fortunate that I do have a partner, which was like, go for it. Like, if this is
That's
what's
great.
going
I
to
was going
make
to
you
ask that.
happy,
Yeah.
just dive in.
Right.
And the good thing is that I dove in, and I feel fortunate is, that it's taken off. And anytime there's a gap in the market, and one offers something to fill it, usually it's a pretty good chance of it working out. Funny story though is about, I got a couple clients, one in January, and then right at the beginning of March. And then obviously everything shut down. I think it was March 13th or 17th,
Right.
right around that time. And so I had to resell both of them and re-engage
Right.
them
Why do you,
and
right, keep me and so forth? Right.
right,
Sure.
right. And they both, kept me on. And that was one of those pivotal entrepreneurial moments where I thought, if I can get two clients, I didn't really lose them, but was about to lose them, and like resell them and re-engage them all within like the first few months of business, I'm going to be okay. So it
I
was
would
a
think that the pandemic actually would be beneficial to you because people are looking to cut costs. They're not looking to bring on a full-time marketing officer. Their funding may be, so they're probably sharpening their pencil even more. So they're looking for someone like you who does have the expertise, but you say, listen, Amanda, we can't bring you on full-time. And you're like, well, I need a full-time job, but you solved that problem.
yeah. Well, at that time, right when it hit, people weren't sure how long it was going to
Well, of
last. So
course,
it was
I
like,
thought it was going to be 3 weeks in my underwear on the couch.
right.
That didn't really work out.
Or like do I need to tighten my belt, watch my expenses, not be investing in things like marketing and whatnot? But
Yeah,
history has taught us that the companies in downturns that do invest in marketing are those that end up in a better place
for
once
sure.
things have become to settle. So
For
I
sure.
had a pretty good story and some great examples over recent, times, and how the importance of investing in marketing during these moments will help your business long term. So I was able to keep them on. But now, that we're further into it and hopefully nearing the end or getting to the end of it, there's certainly more clarity, and what an opportunity for a lot of businesses, and how much the
Oh
marketplace has
yeah.
shifted and will continue to stay the new normal, is an overused phrase, but it really has changed, and it's changed the way we need to think about marketing too.
Yeah, and surprisingly so in the startup space, there's a lot of money on the street. I see deals being done. I see, mid-cap investment companies raising money for all kinds of startups. And, on that part of the business, it's been pretty healthy. I know it was quiet for a while going into the summer, but as people got a vision, I think, for what was going to happen, eventually we would have a vaccine, and eventually we would start, and
Yep.
we're doing business differently now. I think it actually boosted all of this stuff. People have access to expertise now in marketplaces that they didn't have access to before, because they couldn't use a technology or marketing person out of Oregon because they're in New Jersey. And now they can, because everything's connected, and we have Zoom and we have Teams and all this type of stuff. So I think, I'm not happy that 550,000 people died, but there is a silver lining to, the business marketplace. I think you're like at the right time, like perfect,
Hmm.
hate to
Yeah,
say
and
that, but
I uh, I expected to do a lot more traveling, being in this role.
right. That's
So
another thing
it's
for family and life.
right.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see how it's played out, where I'm able to build relationships and do everything virtually. And whenever I joined a conference call prior to November, I guess March 2020, my camera wasn't necessarily on,
No,
and now it's like it's more likely that it's
nor would they
on
have
than
the
it is
technology
off.
necessarily to see you.
Yeah,
So
usually they were grainy and or like
yeah,
stilted. So you're like, I'm not even going to bother. And,
right.
thanks to Zoom and other technologies, it's, and maybe not so thanks to them, because we got to do everything face
Now
to
you got to
face
put
now.
makeup on to get on the
Right,
computer. I
right.
always said that years ago. I said, oh my God, when we go to video phones, we're going to have to like get dressed to answer the telephone. I don't want to do that,
Well,
but you kind of
they're
do it.
in a, slightly related note there. I guess the Botox market has gone up tremendously. People are
Oh, I didn't even
really
think about that. Because
beginning
look,
to,
you can see like this. Look, I think I need some treatments. Never noticed
well, I'm
that
not going to
before.
comment on that.
Yeah. Well, I never noticed that before, but I'm looking at you, looking at myself. It makes you a little self-conscious.
Well, all day
No,
long, you see yourself reflected, and
right.
that certainly would make even the most confident person begin to question, wow, do I need a little touch up here and there? And thank goodness for filters and whatnot
Yeah,
that do
filters.
exist in the cameras. But
Oh, I
yeah,
got
the
stuck on a filter the other day. I couldn't get a cat face off of my. I figured it out. So, but I'm
I
sorry.
wish
We
that would have been on still.
let's go back. So, it's
Yep.
funny because I think that a lot of you mentioned something before, and I want to drive it home. A lot of small business owners, not just startups, they seem to invest in marketing at the wrong times, right? Because times are good, and I'm not saying you shouldn't invest in marketing when times are good. Of course you should, but you also should plan budget wise, right? Because if things turn and they're not within your control, and you have no resources or budget to market and keep your name out there and so forth, that's when you get crushed. That's when
Hmm.
it's most important. And it's kind of something you have to plan for.
Right. And I mean, startups and established businesses, or whether they're public or profitable, or however you want to describe a non-startup, is that they they need to spend, right? Because it's their survival. And
Right.
so if they don't get more revenue, if they don't get more clients, if they don't get to that next step, then they likely won't receive the next round of funding, or they'll run out of money because they won't have the revenue coming in.
Yeah. It's an
And
engine that they
so
have to keep driving.
it's kind of a life or death thing,
Yeah.
not to over dramatize it, but that's really what it is. And so marketing is critical. And I think sometimes it's, depending on who started the company, it's not necessarily understood. Like if you've got finance and the numbers behind it, it's real clear. In sales, you're either selling something and you're not. In
Right.
marketing, and a question I get from CEOs a lot is, how do I know if you're good? Like, how do I measure
Yeah, right.
good
ROI
marketing?
and investment, right? That's a good.
Yep.
So let's discuss that because I think it's very important, even for small
Hmm.
business owners that are not startups. How do they do that? Marketing is elusive the right word? Is it because
Hmm.
it's more of a long haul, right? Content marketing. Like, does my podcast bring me business? Yes, people think of me all the time, but it's not like
How
because
do
I'm
you measure
selling
that though?
something.
Right.
Right. Exactly.
Right. And that's where, when you've got a like a finance oriented brain, mindset, it's like, we'll tie it back to that attribution,
What's the
we talk
data?
about in
Right.
marketing, and it's something that's sort of this, like the dragon that we're always chasing. Like, how do we directly attribute, where someone came from and how that revenue is connected to a marketing campaign or otherwise? And, I, rather than elusive, I describe it as, a blend of art and science. And I think it
Good.
really is. And I say, if it was all science, then every company would be
Right. Of
successful.
course. They would have the formula and they would do it.
Right, but there's certainly opportunities to measure and quantify and get into the science of it or the data of it. But then some of it is also understanding, and I call it client-centric marketing, like getting into the minds of your clients and really understanding what's driving them, what's keeping them up at night, why do they love you, why do they hate you, what's their experience, like where do they go for information, and understanding that, and being able to synthesize that information with the data. That's where the magic of marketing happens.
Sure.
And so there's things you can do on the qualitative side, but there's certainly the key things you can do on the quantitative side. But it's bringing it together, and having the right marketers to bring that together and tell that story or synthesize the information, put together the strategy. That's where the
Rubber
meat is
meets the
separated from the
road.
shaft. Yes, yes,
Right.
exactly.
Okay, good. That's a good answer because I think a lot of it is more of an art than a science, because if not, we could all put Google AdWords out there and just keep making money, but it's always changing, right? If you're marketing somewhere and it's not where your clients are, and you
Hmm.
are wasting your money.
And it's funny, I was listening to a group on Clubhouse this morning, and
Clubhouse.
they were talking about some of the pending changes for on Facebook and their platform, and how it's some things are changing. And it was really great that the woman who was leading the group, she's like, "Look, I've been doing Facebook ads for 13 years or whatever," and she's like, I'm now like, the change doesn't bother me. The algorithms at Google change, the platforms change, but things are constantly evolving. So if you're in especially the digital marketing space, and you don't like change, then you probably need to move to a different part
Right,
of
because you
marketing.
can't just do one thing and continue doing that one thing expecting it to work. It's not going to.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I think is exciting, right? If it was always the same, that would be boring to me. But it's obviously, anytime you have to relearn a system, that can be frustrating, and I appreciate that.
Okay. We'll get to Clubhouse later. I'm an Android person, so I borrowed my daughter's mini
Okay.
iPad mini, but apparently it's too old to work. Clubhouse says your iPad mini is too old, and I can't, and I'm not going to go out and like buy. I don't know. We can talk about that later, but
Okay.
yeah. So let's continue with the discussion because I think that how people market and what they need to do is important. So tell me about Arch Collective and what you're like. How does the whole community work?
Hmm. So I can talk about how it works with the collective side of it, and I can talk about then how we work with our the clients that I bring on too. So going back to when I started Arch Collective, and even in the name of itself, the Arch actually is representative of each of the members of my family's name.
Oh,
And
okay, that's
so
good.
and my husband, his last name is Abraham, so that's really the A, not Amanda.
Okay.
Um, but the if but he's an engineer, and I was talking like, what's something that's really important structurally? Like, give me something that's solid and that, like, will stand the test of time. And so we were talking about an arch, and then it sort of worked with our family. So there's a dual meaning there. But
Good.
also, I think it's a nice representation of the connection between when I work with clients, which is from Series A to Series B. That's typically the arc of when I
Okay.
work with them. And but then collective, I the from the beginning, I knew that I wanted this company. I didn't want to just be a one-off consultant. I wanted to be something bigger than that. One, there's usually a threshold for how big you can grow if you're a one-off business. But also, I mentioned that I have 2 children, and I've met a lot of women that they step out of the workforce and they want to get back in, but the way that the workforce is structured isn't necessarily supportive of where they are and their adjusted goals.
Right.
And so I'm like, wouldn't it be great if I could find a way to tap into that network that I have access to, friends of mine who previously worked, or former colleagues, and not just only women, like any freelance marketer, but I'm like, there's certainly an opportunity to tap into that. And so hence the idea of the collective, where I play the role of the fractional CMO and develop the strategy for my clients, and that's the first thing I do for them. And then once we have that marketing plan, the strategy, the roadmap, whatever you want to call it, then I say, okay, in order to execute on this, you have one or zero, or a handful of marketers on your team. I can use them in these ways, but let's supplement, for some of these projects with my team. And you don't have to hire them full time. I bring them in when I need them, and they exit when you don't. So it's a very efficient use of capital, which is so important for a startup company.
So the collective is a community of professionals that basically provide their services on a fractional basis to multiple companies, just like you did.
Yeah, and the
But
the
not
nice
all
thing,
marketing people. They're not
they're
necessarily
marketers and creative. So I mean, I
okay.
don't I don't have like
Not bringing
necessarily
financial people in
CFOs.
or whatever. Right.
But I mean, I do now, having worked in it, like have a network. So if someone needed a fractional CFO, I
Yeah.
could
Now you
certainly
know a
make a.
business attorney, at least in New
Yeah, I
Jersey.
do.
We're
That's
the
right.
only profession that's landlocked to the state in which we're admitted, but whatever. Yeah.
So but yeah, the group I work with, then I bring them in, and what I think is nice, and why I specifically say we handle all of marketing strategy and execution, is that my clients like that they basically can say, it's all on you. Like, I don't have to worry about who I need. Like, figuring out how to build a marketing team is figuring out who to hire for one marketing role is stressful enough. The fact that someone is going to not only figure out who I need, get the right people, manage all the work,
Yeah.
make
The
sure it gets
bandwidth for
done.
them is incredible. They don't even want to. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's like they kind of throw it. I mean, we're engaged, right? But like they
Right.
throw it over the fence a bit, and then it's like, hey, they know Amanda will and her team will get it done, and I take pride in that, and it's something that I'm glad that I can offer to clients, where it's one less thing for a CEO to have to worry about.
So on the client side, so the client side is not always tapping into the collective. It just depends on the relationship.
Yeah, usually, I mean, I haven't had a client that hasn't used it in some form, but the extent of the usage, it really depends. In fact, I started with a new client recently, and they have quite a marketing team. So, how the collective will be used is going to be very different for them, because most of my clients, they either have no marketing hires, or maybe they have like a very junior marketing hire. And so, we probably need additional skill sets, but they don't want to bring on a full time brand marketer. They don't need to bring on a full-time team to build a new website. It's like, let's bring them in, use their source, or use them as a resource, and then set them free. But you
Now,
get everything you need.
are you working in any particular industries more so than others? I mean, is it, healthcare, medical device, tech, fintech? I don't know.
So most of my clients are, well, they're tech, B2B tech clients.
Okay.
I mentioned, that I was at a large corporation before I did this. It was in the real estate, or property ecosystem, data and analytics, and I was one of the leaders of innovation there. So I met with a lot of startups to understand, what's going on in the marketplace and how could they be impacting our business, and so on. And so because of that, I have, deep relationships with tech and prop tech, and in that space of real estate and insurance technology. So a lot of my clients come from there. Although, I have clients that are in tangential businesses where they're a tech-based company or an AI-based company. And so I've,
Right.
I've got experience there. And sometimes I had someone tap me there. I was like, look, I don't really have experience, but I've worked in a lot of different industries over my career. I'm sure I can learn yours. And as long as you know that with me coming in, I want to be upfront and honest. And they became a client.
Yeah. So in the insurance, let's use the insurance industry as an example. So you're helping them to market the software that they're producing for the real estate client, the customer, right? That using it in their business.
So it's not necessarily, in this case, it's an API. One of my clients,
Oh, I know what APIs
they have a
are. Okay.
web-based platform and an API, and so it embeds into their clients, which are the property and casualty insurers. It embeds into their business. But other than that, yes, you're exactly correct that I'm helping market to the PNC insurers, or I'm helping market to the banks in some cases. And then with this new client, we're marketing to agencies and CPG companies. So that's a
Right.
new space for me.
Yeah, because it's I guess they're subscribing to the software, right? They're using the technology. I mean, are you really their sales team, or are you supplementing their sales team with the marketing? Because it can be different. Sometimes it's the same.
No, I wouldn't say I'm supplementing the sales team, because my clients typically have, a sales team or a
Okay.
salesperson in some cases.
Right.
But my role is to, and it varies depending on the needs of the client. But it's, I often say I make a, $5 million company look like a $50 million company. It's about getting these startups to kind of act like they're the bigger company that they want to be, and get them set up for success. So that's where at Series A, they typically don't have consistent messaging. They're targeting a lot of different clients. And I'm like, let's focus on one client. Let's get the messaging. Let's up level your brand. Let's make sure that things are consistent across channels. So it's getting a lot of those fundamentals right, so that then we can say, okay, we're going to now start doing campaigns, drive leads, do all the things, get more traction to your business. And so that we get that revenue where it needs to be, we get you the Series B, and then, I work with you, or you go on your way and get a full-time CMO at that point.
But you're dealing with the messaging, the branding, the color coordination. I mean, giving it a look and feel across different platforms, I guess, right? Social
Hmm.
media, website, because it's
Yep.
just a mess when you come in.
Not all of them are a mess, but some of them can be, and that's something that I really enjoy. I mean, even though they're B2B tech post
Right, but
Series A
that's the creative
companies,
side of it, right?
they're not necessarily all exactly the same. So it is a good mix of problems that I'm solving. And so that also speaks to the depth and breadth of my collective as well, because it's not like it's just I'm tapping in on a product marketer all the time. I have a woman that I work with in brand. I have a couple people in brand, but I have a couple of graphic designers. I have copywriters. So I've got a good mix, so that depending on what the concern is, I at least have one person that I can tap into to help.
Okay, so this may be a tough question, but the small business owner, right? So
Bring it on.
yeah, so my listenership, and even the world in which I work, are
Mhm.
mostly entrepreneurs, and they're not all looking to raise money necessarily. They're looking to, but a lot of them. This is my opinion, so I don't mean to insult anybody listening, but a lot of them, I don't think really get it when it comes. First of all, forget about a marketing budget, but they don't really have a lot of consistency in what they're doing, right? They have a couple of social media accounts set up. They have a website. I don't know if they're really consistent with their branding, their marketing, their messaging. What kind of advice do you have for people out there who are, maybe they're not startups, but they're small business owners, with trying to make heads or tails out of all this,
Mhm.
which has become craziness because of the pandemic and Zoom, with their marketing?
Yeah, so a couple thoughts there. One, I mentioned that I would call myself a client-centric marketer, and I would say that the best thing you could do, and it's if you're not already doing it, is to schedule some time with clients and say, "Hey, look, I just want to, pick your brain about, like, why do you work with us? What are you doing? Like, what led you to it? Like, how did you find out about us?" And you might think that you know these things, but then chances are when you sit down and you have these conversations, and whether you do them, which I think is great, or if you hire someone outside to do it, which sometimes can be helpful because the client might feel more comfortable sharing, I
Right.
guarantee you're going to learn something. You're going to get insights that will be helpful to your business. And whether it is that it teaches you that what you thought they liked about you is not necessarily what you've been thinking it had been. Like, if it's like, we love you guys because you're so honest and transparent, and we know that whatever we come to you with, you're going to give us a straight answer. And you're like, they love us because of our technology, the fact that we
Right. And
save
they
them
don't even
money.
care. Right.
It's like, yeah, it's great. And
That's
obviously
great.
we
But
don't,
we like, right.
but this is really why we refer people to you. This is why we stick around. And things like that, where you think one thing and then you hear another. So that would be one thing is listen, go out, listen to your
Right.
clients. And
Really understand the people that you're doing business with.
yeah, and it's an exercise called voice of client, or VOC, and it's something I do with all of my clients, and it's integral to how I develop my marketing plans or the
Sure.
strategy that I develop for them.
Right.
The other thing I would say is, if whether you have children or whether you have access in some way, shape, or form to, or like or even a grandparent or something, ask them to describe what you do or what you offer, and whether it's in tech or a service or otherwise. And I think, if it's a humbling exercise,
Yeah.
because I
I've
joke
done
that
this before.
my family is like, what do you do, in any
Right.
role I've
No,
had.
you think they understand what you do and they have no clue
Yeah,
if your
and so
messaging is
then
off. Yeah.
I think exactly. And it's the keep it simple, stupid kind of mentality of like, you don't need to overcomplicate it. And oftentimes, if it's that complicated, people are going to tune you out. So it's like, how do you tell the story to a 10-year-old? Because I'm not trying to diminish the intelligence of executives or people out there making decisions, but like, we have so many things coming at us in a day. Don't
So
make me
much.
work hard to
Right.
figure out what you do. Like,
Yeah.
make it easy
No,
for
because you're
me.
just going to pass.
Exactly.
You're just
You'll
going to
tune
go,
it
well,
out
I'm
and
not
you'll
sure what
just be
Amanda
like,
does. I'm going to go on to the next thing.
exactly.
Yeah. I've asked people that before too. We were always updating our website and stuff because I'm like, well, this says X. Do you understand what that is? And this isn't my kids. This is like another professional. They're like, I really don't know what that means. I know you're a lawyer, but I don't know. So we're always kind of tweaking it. I think a lot of people, they overlook two things. One is what their clients think you do, right? And why they do it. And I guess that also ties into like the concept of the ideal client profile. Like, what is your ideal client? Not necessarily, I mean, by choice too. Like, who do you want to work with? And then why do these people work with you? And I think a lot of business owners, that's when the marketing is just like ad hoc, right? You're just shooting from the hip because you have no idea why you're saying anything. Like, your message could be totally off and you have no clue. You're just guessing.
Exactly. And it doesn't seem like a big deal, but when you're on the receiving end, it gets confusing. And whether it's visually confusing because you're like, is this the same brand? And in fact, one of my clients, when I first heard about them, or I know the chief strategy officer, and he had said, hey, go take a look at our website. He's like, we're trying to close our Series A. We might be good for you to come in and help us. So he told me the name of the company, and I went. I'm like, I don't think this is the website. I'm like, I
You
must have
didn't
the
think it
wrong
was his
one.
website? Like, he sent you the
Right.
wrong site?
Yeah, because he just gave me the name of the company and I Googled
Right.
it.
You
And so
Googled it.
then he had
Was
followed up,
it?
and turns out it was the right one, but I went to it 3 times. And so I'm like, all right. And this particular client has an amazing executive team. The CEO is very receptive. And so in one of our first calls, I was like, I got to be honest, your website sucks. I'm like, I didn't know that it was your company, and I knew the person who worked there. Like, if I don't get it, like, what other people aren't getting it?
Right.
And so like, and I gave him some examples, and there was a little bit of UI UX that was complicated. But anyway, it's you don't want people to not get it. You don't want people to think they have the wrong company. You want people to be able to pronounce your company's name. Like, these are some things
Yeah.
that
Right.
seem obvious, but sometimes don't happen. And I appreciate that, especially with startups. Their heads are down and they're just running. They're sprinting through a marathon. And so of course things are going to get missed. And so it's not a knock on them, but it's like, hey, you brought me in to help you fix these things. So if
Well, of
I'm not being
course.
honest and
Right.
identifying them, that's
Then you're
not,
not
then
worth
I shouldn't be
anything.
here. Right,
Right.
right.
Yeah. But that's a pretty big, I mean, look, I'm not saying that it's easy. It's not easy to admit. It is that like you said, they have 14,000 things going on. Who knows what they're dealing with? That's done. Oh, good. But that's a big issue. I mean, if you, who's coming to work with them, it can't find that, I mean, not can't find, goes to their website and think, oh, I don't think this is them, then yeah, that's a big,
Well, we did change it. So like,
yeah, I would hope. Yeah,
problem
right. It's
problem
much
solved.
better now.
And the going back to understanding your ideal client profile, or your target customer, the at that point, and it was good input that they're like, look, we were trying to target investors and raise money up until
In
this point.
general, just in general,
Right. So it
anybody.
wasn't like me, or the average person needed to understand it. We just needed the investor to understand it. And so that's what we are focused on. And it's like, okay, well, at this point, we're focused on acquiring new customers. So we got to change it so it speaks to the customers we're acquiring. And it's, even though that conversation seems obvious and like a CEO should be open to it, not often are people open to changing something that they've already built. It's whether it's the mentality of like, this is my baby,
Right.
or,
They're
they're
emotionally
emotionally
attached to it.
attached.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I always appreciate when I have a client that's like, yeah, maybe this isn't what I want to hear, but appreciate you being honest. And yeah, let's go fix it. Cause that makes my job easier too.
Well, that's also the ones that are successful. I mean, you can't
Yeah.
get it right all the time. As a matter of fact, you probably get it wrong 80% of the time. That's why you rely on good teams of people,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know?
Well, and that particular client, did a good job in fundraising. So, that speaks to their success as well.
Maybe it speaks to the fix you did on all the
Yeah,
marketing stuff.
I'm sure they'd love it. I'll take all the credit for
Yeah. No,
that.
you
Yeah,
don't
thank
take
you.
all the credit, just like 80% of it. That's fine. Yeah. Okay. So we
Cool.
got knowing your client, understanding your customer, which is definitely a big miss for people. They think because they think they
Mhm.
do. So they're like, oh, we understand our customer, and they're totally wrong. I would say 80% and 90% of the time they're wrong in some respect, right?
Mhm.
So what's the next piece of advice? You
It would
got
be
that down. Now what do you do?
mhm. Well, and this one might go before all of that, but it's figure out who is, you mentioned your ideal customer profile. I talk about your target audience. And especially in startups, and I think this applies to a lot of small businesses where you're looking to bring in customers and you say yes to anyone, but then you have this like really wide swath of customers. Who is your target? And then you've got to, if you wanted to market to that group, you'd have to spend a ton of money in a ton of different areas because
Right.
every
You're
group
all over the
isn't
place. Right.
exactly. And so that's the other thing I talk about with clients is I say, okay, we need to focus, we need to prioritize. We can always move into other markets, other industries, other customer
Right.
segments. But for now, we're going to focus and we're going to go hard and fast after X segment. And then once we're there, we'll start to expand. And so before you go into the VOC and whatnot, figure out who that target is that you want to go after.
Right.
And then I would talk to the lookalike customers who look like that and begin to understand them, because once you build out that story and then you set out your campaigns and you execute and you measure and then you're like, okay, this is working or not, and you have some success, then you can go back and repeat that process with the other targets and the other segments. And then all of a sudden you're like, wow, my business has grown a lot. But you kind of got to like go hard and fast after one, learn your lessons, and then repeat it and or replicate it and go out to the other markets.
Yeah. I think that's a huge mistake that a lot of small business startups do that make, because they think that by limiting their message or picking a lane or whatever, that they're somehow giving up business. But I think it's the opposite. If you're all over the place, you never gain traction, you never gain focus. Nobody, your message isn't consistent, and you're not really growing. And the ones that get focused, like, look, I'm a lawyer. I do certain things that I don't do. Does that mean that I turn away people that are referred to me because it's whatever that I can do, but I don't do it full time? Yeah, I don't turn them away, but I don't want my marketing message to be out there trying to convince people that I do everything when
Well, and
it's just not healthy way to run your business.
yeah, it's the FOMO of business, right? The fear
Right.
of missing
That's
out. And
the word I was trying to think of. Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
but I might push back on you to say, why say yes? Like if you don't want more customers that look like that, there is power in no. And I am by no means a coach. I do have a coach and we talk about these things too, like,
Yeah.
putting no into the universe so you get something better back.
Yeah.
But like I think that going back to this first startup I worked at, I was in sales and I worked with orthodontists and we were talking about patient referrals. And they said, we only ask our best patients for referrals because like refers like. And so if you've got a compliant patient that pays their bills and does a great job, keeps their
Right.
teeth clean, you want more patients like that, not the ones that don't do what you say and then they complain that their treatment's
Right.
taking longer. And so, going back to the power of no, if you say yes to clients that aren't necessarily what you want to build your business, then they're going to maybe refer more people that are the wrong clients, and you
Right.
could get down a path, and it's like, what is your business?
And not only that,
So
you say no to those people who referred from somebody else who you have a relationship with. Maybe they're not your perfect client, but you have a relationship with them. There's a ripple effect. And now you're stuck
right.
not being able to say no because you don't want you're worried about the ramifications of that getting out there. That's a huge one. If you
Yeah.
build a clientele, like you take anybody walks in the door, let's say I'll use residential closings in New Jersey. Attorneys still
Okay.
do them in New Jersey. I don't like
Mm.
doing them. I'll do them as a favor for a friend. There's no money in it. But I know guys that's all they do, and they're stuck because that's all they get referred. Nobody thinks of them for anything else. And that's not where they want to. I want to shift home and do another kind of law. Well, good luck. I mean, you get like
Right.
it's
Turning the
difficult. You got to
Titanic
say
at
no.
that point.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's a big
So
problem.
I am still a young company, and I don't want to have to say no to clients, but in fact, I have an example of a client where I didn't say no. They were pre-Series A, and I don't work with pre-Series A clients for certain reasons. And I took them on because I was like, oh, I have the bandwidth right now, and it wasn't a good fit. And so now when I talk to pre-Series A, I'm like, I'd love to be able to help you. Give me a call when you've got your Series A funding, and we can pick up this conversation. And as much as I don't want to turn away the business, it's
Right.
not the right business for me, and it's
Right.
not the best for them. Like, they don't need me, they don't need what I offer them. So I think of it as I'm helping them, even though I'm saying no, because they're gonna go figure out what they need to do to get to Series A, and then they can bring me in, and then I can really make an impact for their business.
Yeah. I think that's the short, the short sightedness of and it's human nature, right? You're getting started. You're still in the startup phase, really, right?
Mhm.
We're all in. I feel like I'm always in the startup phase, and
Right.
and and you don't want to say no to anybody. You're like, well, I need the money. I want the clients. I want to build a successful company. And it's this voice in your head that's saying, Amanda, you can't turn away. We don't have any customers. You got to, or
Yeah.
we have three and you go, but then now you bring on this person and you've kind of filled a slot, so to speak. Right. And then you don't have room for the next person. So next week you meet the right person, the perfect person. You're like, oh shit, I shouldn't have taken that other person on because now
Yeah.
I got the right customer.
Well,
And I think people got to give themselves more of a chance.
and we talk about case studies in marketing, and you probably have some version of that as well for your business. And so this particular client, if they're not the right fit, if they can't give you a case study that you can then use to find the next client, well, then it's like, why did you do it? Like, yes, you get a paycheck, but it's not really gonna, like you said, long term help your business. So not that we need to beat this dead horse of saying no, but I do really think it's hard to do. And it's been hard for me. And so I appreciate that. But
But
when I
there are
do say
tactful
no,
ways to do it
oh, of
and
course.
still seem like you're
Yes.
helping people. I'd say no to people on the podcast. I don't think this is perfect for you. We don't have the right listenership. Let me refer you to somebody who I think can find the right fit for you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's how your person, I forget who it was, but found me. And then she's like, you got to talk to Amanda. She's great. So yeah. Okay. So we got two very important things, maybe the most important: your message, knowing your customer, and knowing when to say no. Right.
I think that's a good
Amanda's
summary.
secrets of life.
Right.
So
The power of no is definitely a
the
good
power of
life
no. I love that. That's got to be the title of your book.
lesson. That's yeah. When I get around to writing it, and I will attribute credit, and I don't know if your legal services can help with that kind of
A
thing, but
little bit. Yeah, I
I'll
do those
need
kind
a
of contracts publishing. Actually, I have some good ghostwriters too. That would probably be like, they'll get a lot of it done for you. You just got to
even
kind of meet
better,
with them once
even
a
better.
week. Yeah, I'm working on a book right now. It's
Really?
called it's called 10 ways to get sued by anyone and everyone. And it's about, running your business so you don't get sued. And my friend Barry, I've probably said this on podcasts too many times, but my friend Barry's helping me write it. If it would be blank if I wasn't doing this with him. So we're like adding things in, and I'm basically setting up interviews on Zoom, and then I'm transcribing it and I'm giving it to him because I
Well,
don't want to
and
write this stuff.
you might have given me the fourth point that I would say, which to me that speaks of high emotional intelligence. You know where your strengths lie, you know who you are, and I think that's when you're in a leadership role, whether owning your own business or leading an organization, or a function within an organization, having EQ is so important, because And this might go back to, another recommendation, which is you don't always, and you probably don't want to be hiring people that look like you, that think the same way. There is power in diversity of thought, in diversity of experience, and
Yeah.
even as simple as just someone being able to say, well, when I read this sentence, like the cat ran, or whatever sentence it is, this is what I picture in my mind. And it's like, well, I picture an orange cat I pick on a street. And it's like, I picture a black cat running through the grass. And it's like, we both heard the same sentence in different things. And I think
Right.
that there's power in that diversity of thought, and making sure you're bringing people into your organization, whether it's contractually or, full-time hires that can help bring a different perspective.
Yeah. So knowing your strengths versus your, not weaknesses, but your limitations, like, what, stick in your lane, stick with what you know. Don't try and be a jack of all trades. Sometimes we have to, right? You just start, it's just you. But
Right.
I tell people when they write business plans, one of the four pillars of a business plan is personnel. And if that personnel is just you should evaluate whether you're the person who brings all those skills to your business. And if you don't, and be honest with yourself, right? Go out and call Amanda and say, listen, can you be my marketing person? I've raised X amount of dollars, whatever. You might say, well, you haven't gotten past Series A yet, but call this person and can you do it? And, maybe it's too expensive to get these people. Maybe you don't have the right expertise, but figure that out early on because you're going to fail.
Yeah, and I think it's great to do a lot of the things on your own in a way, especially as an entrepreneur, to learn, okay, what are the things that I'm avoiding? Why am I avoiding those?
Right.
Those are probably the things I'm not good at or I don't like, that I'm likely going to need to outsource in some way, whether it's a full-time hire or otherwise. And then, but if you know how to do it in some way and
Yeah.
you've
You got to
already
know how
done
your
it,
business operates, obviously.
exactly.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. But no, the EQ, and in fact, um, I did a TikTok, speaking of different channels,
Trying to
and
figure
I was
that
talking,
out too. Yeah.
and I was talking a little bit about EQ and how I think, in fact, there's often a transition point at Series A funding where a founder might be replaced by an outside CEO, and how it takes an incredible amount of EQ to recognize that need. And sometimes the investors recognize it and the person doesn't.
Sometimes they do.
Right. But there often are shifts because the game has changed at
It's a
that point.
different skill set. There's no question
Exactly.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So business people are using TikTok. I see my kids in the living room dancing and doing, I'm like, come here, dad. I'm like, don't get me on TikTok. Like, I'm not going to do this crazy video with you. And you put some funny face on me,
Well, you did
so
a cat face you already mentioned, so I
by
don't know, why can't
accident,
you?
somebody showed
Okay.
me
Okay.
Facebook, you can do, cause I have an Android, right? So I can't use FaceTime. So
Okay.
Facebook Messenger, you can do video and then there's all kinds of filters on there.
Yep.
So yeah, so that's, yeah,
Well, so the
TikTok.
going back to knowing your audience, I wouldn't say that TikTok is where my clients' audiences are, and I would argue
Right.
it's not where my audience is either. As a marketer who wants to learn and grow, like, I think part of my job is also to try these things out, and
Yeah.
to if I was a chef, like trying different cuisines or going to different restaurants, right?
Right.
It
Right.
may not be what I serve, but
No,
I
but you
should
need to
still
know this for
know
your customers too, for your
exactly.
clients. Yeah.
Yeah, and as I'm building and developing my brand and understanding what platforms work for me, I thought, hey, I'll give TikTok a try, and in some ways that led me to begin to start doing podcasts, because I was like, oh, this is other than just a picture or like on LinkedIn where you've got a post and written words, being able to discuss and have a conversation and engage, I enjoyed that. And
Yeah.
so even though TikTok, it was often a one-way
Those are
engagement,
quick too, right? They're shorter.
yeah, I still got to have a say, a voice out there rather than just words in an image. And so it's not the best fit for my business. And I would say that, depending, going back to know your audience, if you are a B2B company and your audience is on TikTok, then you should be there. But if your audience isn't there, then it's probably not the best use of your time and marketing dollars to be spending a lot of time on a channel that no one's going to be paying attention to.
Right. Well, I think it gets back to what you said before. I just lost my train of thought, but when it comes down to these different platforms, um, it you said before about somebody who recognizes that things are always going to change and they're okay with that. Like they don't just put it out there and why isn't this working anymore? Well,
Hmm.
you posted that 8 years ago, and that's why, it's not working anymore. But I think that, yeah, I think that if you want to dabble in different, not dabble, but you can't just stay static, right? You can't just say, oh,
Right.
LinkedIn is the place for me to be. Meanwhile, other things are going on. You got to learn those things. But I find that, do you find that, I guess, audio and video are more compelling now than just the written word? I mean, they kind of have to be overlapping in terms of like, you can't just post articles anymore, right?
Hmm. Well, and
Or does it
I'll
depend
tie
on
it
the
again.
industry, right?
Yeah, it really depends. I mean, you at any given moment might prefer reading something versus watching a video. So I like, let's say I'm, you know, my husband's fallen asleep and I'm in bed looking at my phone. I'm not going to put on a video. I might read a blog, but like during my day, I might have 30 seconds to watch a quick video versus taking time to like read a long blog. So
Right.
I think that each individual is different at different times, and one might say that each industry is different. So videos might resonate more with one than another, but to me the real thing is taking any piece of content and finding lots of ways to use that piece of
Right.
content. So if
Right.
you've got a blog, well, turn it into a script for a video, turn it into some posts, turn it into an
Audio
infographic, or
clips. Right.
you got it. And so it's
Headliner. Yeah.
if you're investing in the content, juice it, right? Like
Right.
get the most out of it that you can.
Right. Well,
And then
but part of that gets back to what you said, right? Knowing your customer, knowing where your customers are and where they're going. Like just because they're here doesn't mean they're going to stay there. So if you keep marketing to them on Facebook and then you realize everybody went over to TikTok,
mhm,
you're not
right.
really getting to the people you want to get to.
Yeah, exactly. And thinking like Clubhouse, which is my understanding
Clubhouse is
just
all
launched.
audio, right?
Yeah, and I think it started in January, so not that long ago. And I was on it, and there are people who have like 55,000 followers or like hundreds of
Yeah, I
thousands of
know.
followers
It's
too.
crazy, right? Yeah.
Right, in a very short period of time. And but like what you get on Clubhouse is very different than what you get on TikTok. But then there are people, personalities, companies, whatever, that have transitioned from one to the other. And so it'll be fascinating to see where that goes and how it's utilized. But there's always something new coming, and it's maybe a bad phrase, but it's like I never want to be the old dog who's never learned new tricks. So it's kind of
Right.
like you gotta stay in touch and know what's going on. And it may be right for you, it may not be, but like I'd rather know how I feel about it or understand why it isn't, so I can go to a client and say this is good for these reasons or this isn't good for these reasons, and be able to offer that insight to the people who I'm working with.
Yeah. Well, the digital world, moves very fast. And I think with the pandemic and everybody being forced online and onto Zoom and connecting that way, it's sped up tenfold, in terms of what's going on. Look,
Hmm.
I don't know how I would utilize it, but I do know a divorce attorney, a family law attorney who is using TikTok. Her son knows how to do, I don't know, whatever. And she's putting these short things out and she's getting business from it. She's getting calls and contacts and connections. And she's putting things about to know if you're getting divorced or before you get married or guardianship issues. I don't know, whatever she's putting out there. And she's engaging, connecting, whatever the term is.
Yeah, both. And in fact, I had a surgeon come across my feed, and he's quite witty. And I was watching him like, these are brilliant, like the way that
He's got a good
and
personality.
right, and he's
Yeah.
been very clever in how he's used some of the trends that were on TikTok and whatnot, and apply them to his business. So, and this goes back to the art part of marketing, right? Where, hey, sometimes you can build a niche or build a market where you wouldn't expect it to be, right?
Yeah, happens a lot,
Sometimes
right?
taking a risk there's a high reward for that.
Yeah, yeah, because you're just standing out. I mean, that's the hardest part, right? Isn't it? Standing out in the crowd. You had
Hmm.
mentioned before, we are bombarded with information minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day. It passes us like like you're at a buffet, one of those where you go to the cafeteria and the food's going on the tray. And
Right.
if you don't take that one, something else comes. And that's kind of the way life works now, even faster. So you have to be like, that's why I always tell people, like, even with the podcast, you got to be consistent with, if you're a solo person, a small, you got to put stuff out on a regular basis. You can't just
Hmm.
post something and say, oh, that didn't work, because
Hmm.
nobody probably heard it.
Right. And I mean, that's where also, you can use the same piece of content other times because
They didn't probably see it the first 6 times. So.
right. And I mean, this gets into that territory too of authenticity and what your brand stands for. And so if you're not, your brand isn't one that's going to always be on top of the trend or what have you, then like, also don't worry about it. Like I always say, play your game, right? It's easy to have your head on a swivel and get that FOMO,
You
like,
get
oh, well, this
stressed
person did
about it.
this and
Yeah.
that person did this. And it's like, if that's not right for your business, if it's not right for your brand, if it's not going to reach your customers, then just like be okay, kind of like sticking to your plan. And yeah, we all need to be nimble and flexible and recognize where the tides have turned or there's industry shifts. But to some extent, being consistent is half the battle in a world where things are changing so fast. If you're continually being like, I am, client centric, or I'm, there's a lot of transparency, or all of my innovation is focused on business results, and you hit that point time and time again, eventually
It'll resonate.
that it will resonate.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of people, I mean, I was just talking to somebody the other day and we're putting together an article and some stuff. And then I said, listen, I'm not going to invest in this unless I get 25 different pieces out of it. Like it's going to go on a blog and it'll be published here. And but I think that's one of the problems is that people they just try to do too much. They're like, well, if you do the podcast, you can transcribe that and then put that here and you can make blog. Do you know how long it takes to transcribe an hour podcast? I mean, I don't have a staff, right? So I'm not paying somebody to clean up our transcription, but it's wrong. I mean, so you have to go through it line by line.
Can I offer a solution here? Because I
Yes.
use so I am no way, shape, or form associated with this business, but the company is Amber Script, and it is very affordable transcription.
How
And
accurate
so
is it? That's the issue.
extremely accurate.
Okay.
And yes, you still will need to go through and clean up because if you're umming and awing, you don't want all that. But like
Right.
cleaning up a
No, but the words themselves are pretty accurate.
Yeah, very.
Okay.
And so when
I
I mentioned I do these
Amber
voice
Script.
of client calls, and oftentimes, I'll record them and then I'll want to go back and reference, or someone on my collective is working on it with me. If I'm doing a one-on-one call, I want to be able to share. And sometimes people prefer to read versus hear a conversation. And so I use their transcription services all the time, or even for voice notes for me if I'm ideating about something. So yeah, I would put that as a
All
best
right, I will
practice for my
definitely check
business.
that out.
Yeah.
Maybe we can get them as sponsors of the show. But I know that if I take your transcript and I put it in the show notes, it's now searchable by the search engines. They can't search our audio, and not yet, right? They can't search our video, I don't think, right?
Well, I don't know, amberscript.com for the answer. Maybe I should
go.
ask them for a promotion fee, but
right,
they're
exactly.
great. They're great. Yeah, no. So shout out to them.
I'll definitely check them out. All right. So I have taken up a lot of your time this morning. What do you want to leave with some thoughts about advice you're already given very good advice. It's probably one of the best conversations I've had about marketing and stuff. But any closing thoughts? We'll put your, links in the show notes so people can get in touch with you. What's the best way for people to reach you? I mean, what's the website? Archcollective.com?
It's arch-collective.com. Yes. And if you're a freelance marketer, creative, go to the collective page and there's an application that you can submit.
Okay.
And I'm always open to meeting new marketers and creatives with a variety of backgrounds. So if you're interested, don't hesitate to reach out. And if you're a company that's about to be closing on your Series A and thinking about bringing in marketing help, or you've just closed your Series A, go to the clients page, and then there's a form where you can get in touch with me, and then I'll follow up and we can set up an intro call for 15 minutes where I can learn a bit more about you and see if it's the right fit, and then we go from there.
Perfect. So what's the weather like out in Michigan today?
It is nice? Actually, well, right now it's sunny and it's supposed to be 60. It snowed a little bit on Wednesday, so
Oof.
the schizophrenia of Michigan weather in the spring is real, but it's supposed to be beautiful. So I'm looking forward to
it was
nice
really
weekend.
Cold yesterday. I think that all came from you guys.
It probably did. You're welcome. Sent that your
some people got
flowers,
hail.
Right?
It's like in April. Yeah, it's crazy. But Amanda, I can't thank you enough for spending time with me and for us getting in touch.
This is
great. And yeah, let's definitely stay in touch. And I'd love to watch your business grow and see how you affect people.
Yeah, well, I look forward to your help in publishing the book that now
your
I need
memoir.
To go write.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, Amanda.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a good one.
You too.